The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
Welcome to a special edition of Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association, connecting Virginians to their government. I'm Woody Evans. We're pleased to have as our special guest Secretary of Transportation, Aubrey Layne. Good to see you, sir.
Woody, good morning. Thanks for having me here today.
Welcome, and I noticed there's some new welcome signs at Dulles Airport. Talk to us about that.
There is. As you know, Governor McAuliffe travels in and out of the Commonwealth many times through Dulles, and on one of his trips overseas, he was asking people had they been in the Commonwealth, and many of them said they weren't sure. And then he asked them, well, did you land at Dulles? And they said, well, yes. Well, he said that's in the Commonwealth. And on his return trip, he found out there wasn't a welcome sign up there, and gave me a call, and we now have new Virginia welcome signs welcoming all our foreign and domestic customers to the Commonwealth of Virginia. So it's really the icon, Virginia is for lovers. That sign is now up there and is going up across all the airports in the state and our major entry points on our roadways also.
Great, and that's part of your responsibility, aviation. We were talking earlier about how important that is to driving this new economy.
Yes, in fact, all the agencies in transportation are certainly very important to Governor McAuliffe's new Virginia economy. And tourism, obviously, and also freight with our airports, very important to that. So making sure when people come visit the Commonwealth, they know where they are, they know they're welcome here, we're open for business is obviously very, very important.
And of course, you're a native of the Hampton Roads area, and the Port of Virginia is a critical part of that as well.
I am, and the port, by some estimates, reports say 1 in 10 jobs in the entire Commonwealth are either directly or indirectly related to the Port of Virginia. I'm happy to say port's in a very good place. They just had record year of tonnage through the port, but also for the first time in 5 or 6 years, there have been sustainable operations. By that I mean they're making an operating profit. And what's important about that, Woody, is that I don't know, I have a business background. I don't know of any business that's growing that isn't profitable and sustainable. The Port of Virginia has proven it can be that, and taking on this additional tonnage, as that bodes well for us to be a key part of the economy going forward also.
Now, we're very fortunate because that port can take care of these post-Panamax ships now. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, those ships are already calling on us, but with the opening of the Panama Canal, which should be in late 2016, that now opens up trade routes from the Orient, from the China markets. We're about equidistance around the world, 11,700 miles one way, 11,400 the other.
So east or west? East or west.
So from as you know, a lot of shippers look long term. They now know that in times of political uncertainty, they can get to the Virginia waters and to the east coast of the United States about the same time. So that is really giving us a very, very competitive edge against other competitors, not only on the East Coast, but also the West Coast. We currently have the only 50-foot channel that's dredged to go to 55-foot with no overhead obstruction, so we can take these large ships. So we're well positioned, and again, that's why it's so important that the port, which has proven it can be, is a very, very key component of this new economy for us.
Now, in Warren County around Front Royal, there's a sign I see periodically that says Inland Port. What does that have to do with your responsibilities?
It's part of the Port of Virginia, not only the ports in Hampton Roads, but the port in Front Royal, which is serviced by rail service by Norfolk Southern. And the key there is we're able to unload the ships and bring it inland to a distribution center that not only takes trucks off the road, but also develops commerce around the inland port there. We're also now doing that with the Port of Richmond. We have it currently under a short-term lease, but we're working with the City of Richmond for a long-term lease so the Port of Virginia can make investments. So whether it's agricultural products, and the governor has made clear he wants the Port of Virginia to be the top agricultural exporting port on the East Coast, well on our way to doing that. Whether it's that or paper products or whatever, we can now bring them into Richmond or Front Royal, can heavily load either those trains or those barges, much more heavy than we can trucks, get them off the highways, and have a sustainable route between the inland areas and to the Port of Virginia there in Hampton Roads.
So you mentioned trains, so obviously rail is another important component.
Absolutely, it's important. In fact, about 30% of all the cargo coming into the Port of Hampton, Virginia, is through rail. It's serviced by both our Class 1 railroads in this Commonwealth, Norfolk Southern and CSX, both good partners. And of course, that gives us access to the rest of the country, to the major markets. And as you know, that means we can both have trucks that come in on the shorter routes, the 700 or 800 miles, but on the longer routes we can get cargo in. So we can offer our customers at the port access to any major opportunities here in the continental United States.
Yeah, and as I understand it, because Virginia is so geographically well located, we're within a couple of days' drive of other major cities and towns.
Yeah, and the population, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. Which is obviously who uses the goods are the people, and to have the access both through our truck and through our rail partners. It just makes, again, the opportunities for the Port of Virginia very, very good.
Now, we're in the basement of the General Assembly today, and they're debating a number of issues, including transportation, funding issues. Talk to us about some of the legislation that has been debated over the last few years. Specifically, let's talk about House Bill 2.
Absolutely. A very, very key part of legislation that Governor McAuliffe asked me to work with Speaker Howell on in developing last year, and we were able to get that in. But let me go back a little bit. This all started in 2013 with House Bill 2313, which was the first time in 30-some years that the Commonwealth of Virginia put additional monies into transportation. And so really want to thank the legislators for their courageous efforts and that leadership to bring that to fruition. Though on the heels of that, then, as you mentioned, Woody, House Bill 2, that deals with how we're going to be good stewards of that money. If we're taking more money from our taxpayers, they ought to see results. And one of the things that House Bill 2 does is it asks the Commonwealth Transportation Board, or actually directs the Commonwealth Transportation Board, which is the 14-member board that's charged with allocating monies across the Commonwealth, to try to move away from political influence and really use objective measures on how to allocate monies across the Commonwealth. So that's what House Bill 2 does. It says there are 5 measures to be considered: congestion mitigation, economic development, safety, accessibility, how it ties into our current program, and environmental concerns. Weight those factors, also take into account a return on investment. And the intent is to be able to line up projects across the Commonwealth that gives the best bang for the buck to our taxpayers. Now, what the law says is, once you rate them or you prioritize them, it infers that you will take the highest rated project and fund it first. But it doesn't mandate it. But it says if you don't do that, you need to explain to the Commonwealth and to our citizens why. So I think the additional accountability and the transparency will make much better decisions. So House Bill 2, very important piece of legislation, was both bipartisan, bicameral, and I really thank the leadership, both the governor and Speaker Howell and others in the House and the Senate for getting that passed.
Now, as a businessman, you know how important it is to assess risk. How do you assess risk within the context of what you just talked about?
You know, that is exactly the key element to look at. We've had to deal with a few issues since coming into office, and at the heart of it is the assessment of risk. In my business background, when I looked at risk, it was how I was going to get paid for it and what happened to me if I didn't take care of it. I found that in the Commonwealth here, and one of the things we're working on, it's more of a process, and we really need to put mitigating factors in place to make sure that our taxpayers are covered. Now, that was probably most prevalent. We saw that in the Route 460 project, where a lot of monies were spent before we actually had a permit. There's legislation this year sponsored by, again, Governor McAuliffe, this time working with Delegate Jones in the House, the Chairman of Appropriations, and the Chairman of Transportation, Tom Rust, where we have two bills, House Bill 1886 and House Bill 1887, that address those risk issues, help recodify some of our P3 or public partnership guidelines. It's passed, both bills have passed the House overwhelmingly. They're now in the Senate. We hope to have them in place here in the next few days.
Back up for a moment, if you will, in terms of the funding mechanism that's being implemented. How is that funding mechanism created? I mean, I think there's a wholesale gas tax. There's a sales tax now as well.
That's correct. So it used to be, like many other states, before the new legislation, House Bill 2313, the new funding, that everyone got charged a cents per gallon. The major component of House Bill 2313 converted that to a wholesale percentage per gallon. And so what that was done is, so if the price of gas rose or if economic activity rose, more gallons, then obviously more people using the roads and our infrastructure, more monies would be paid in. So that was the major theory behind House Bill 2313. Although there are some additional taxes that come from sales taxes. And, you know, a lot of people discuss, well, whether it should be user fees or what. From my point of view, transportation underpins our economy, our way of life, actually I believe our very freedoms. However we choose to pay for it, as long as it's sustainable, it includes multimodal modes, because besides highways we have transit that's very important to the Commonwealth, and it has the ability to grow as their system is being used. Those are key components. House Bill 2313 did that. I think we're well set up. Now, one of the things we've encountered, Woody, is that price of gas is down.
Yes.
Now, that's good news for our many citizens, but may not so much be good news for money coming in. So we've had a little bit of reduction, but we still have plenty of money. We got $5 billion as an annual budget through the transportation agencies. Our Virginians and our taxpayers should expect results, and that's what the McAuliffe administration is aiming to do in our time here.
Now, to what extent was that fund impacted by the inability of our friends in Washington to pass legislation to allow us to tax internet retail sales?
Well, it was influenced significantly. 2313, the House bill with the funding legislation, anticipated the passage of the Marketplace Fairness Equity Act, which basically would have taxed internet retailers the same as in-store or brick-and-mortar retailers. That did not pass Congress, and the key issue there was that it provided many more monies to transit than flows through the normal allocation through the wholesale gas tax. There was a provision in 2313 that allowed, if that passage did not happen, that the gas tax would be increased by 1.6%, went from 3.5 to 5.1 cents per gallon, which is about a nickel a gallon. And at today's low prices, I'm not saying anybody wants to pay more taxes, but it's hardly noticed. But the key there was not as many monies would have flowed into transit. So one of the pieces of legislation sponsored this year by the governor and Delegate Jones and Rust is House Bill 1887. It's sort of an omnibus bill, but a part of that bill is it takes additional monies to put into transit so that we do not incur a reduction in the amount that we're offering our transit agencies around the Commonwealth. So it's a very good point. That bill is also will reverse if they ever do pass Marketplace Fairness Equity Act. But that's part of the legislation that we've worked with this year to get so far through the House, hopefully through the Senate.
Now, for some time, the Commonwealth was unable to engage in capital projects because road maintenance, or was it the reverse?
No, that's correct. We were having our road maintenance dollars reduced, or excuse me, our capital dollars reduced because we needed more money for road maintenance. And that still a concern. We right now, I think there was a report that just came out and ranked our infrastructure, our transportation infrastructure, a C- up from a D. So we have a long ways to go. But with House Bill 2313, we have some monies to address it. And that leads again to another part of House Bill 1887, which deals with the state of good repair and recognizes that we need to put monies in that. So a part of House Bill 1887 designates the first 40% of construction monies each year to state of good repair over and above what we're spending on maintenance, to try to bend that curve back to us getting our infrastructure back in place. We're really suffering from about 3 decades of underfunding and trying to get things back in place, but we do have a plan, and House Bill 2, House Bill 1887, will go a long ways to getting the monies to where they need to be.
Now, the Commonwealth has been a leader in public-private partnerships. There's one that was just opened the end of last year, the new hot lanes.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about how that came about and how successful it has been so far.
Well, it is. The new hot lanes on Interstate 95 have been a tremendous success, as did the original 7 or 8, I think it was 13 miles on 495. Now we have almost 40 miles, basically from Stafford County almost all the way to D.C., not quite, where consumers now and motorists have a choice. They can either stay in the free lanes or pay to be in managed lanes, what we call hot lanes. That was a private public partnership that has worked very, very well. Commonwealth leveraged its dollars, and it's done what it was supposed to do. It's a model where we used the private monies and their technology and their innovation to deliver a project for the benefit of the citizens here in the Commonwealth. You mentioned we've been a leader. We have been. I've recently spent some time in Australia. I was invited to go there to speak at an infrastructure conference at the invitation of the Victorian government, where I gave a talk about the differences between public-private partnerships in the United States or here in Virginia and in Australia. And hopefully to learn from them and us from them also. By the way, Australia is the largest investment of foreign dollars in the Commonwealth because of their infrastructure investments in 95 and also the Hampton Roads area. So we have been a leader. I'll make it clear, Governor McAuliffe and I, very big proponents of public-private partnerships. Because we can't deliver these billion-dollar projects plus without having additional monies. But having said that, we've got to be good stewards. And we got to make sure we take care of the risk in the contracts. Again, another piece of legislation sponsored by Governor McAuliffe and Delegate Jones and Rust is House Bill 1886, which codifies some of the new guidelines that the Commonwealth Transportation Board has adopted in relation to our P3s. Basically, now when a finding of public interest is determined, the Secretary of Transportation has to sign off and say, when we deliver the project, this finding of public interest is what we said we were going to deliver. That's a key component. Another key component is now legislators will have input up front as to whether something is a P3, where here before they didn't have that. And we heard loud and clear from the private industry that having legislators on board up front reduced political risk. Not so much voting 140 members at the end, but we've taken care of that in House Bill 1886. And back to your point about risk, hey, this bill also requires the procuring agency, whether it's VDOT or another agency, if something is determined as high risk, that there has to be mitigating factors in the contract. So another good piece of legislation that's passed the House. You know, all that from my business background seems pretty basic to me, but now we'll have it codified, so from administration to administration, our taxpayers will know that there'll be good stewards of Virginia tax dollars in these public-private partnerships.
Now, the P3 project in Northern Virginia is a little bit different from the P3 project in Hampton Roads. The one in Northern Virginia is based upon dynamic pricing, as I understand it. The one in Hampton Roads is not. Talk to us about why there is a difference in the pros and cons.
Yes, in fact, that was actually the main issues I dealt with in my speech in Australia, because policy matters. These are both financial projects. We're delivering transportation needs, but policy matters. In Northern Virginia, there were no additional tolling or fees charged to the motorist until the new capacity was added. In Hampton Roads, unfortunately, there was pre-tolling of an existing facility to help pay the project. Not only was there pre-tolling of the existing, actually they lost some because one of the tunnels in the downtown Midtown tunnel had to be closed for refurbishing. So we already had a clogged project up. Now we took away some capacity and now charged a toll. So that did not go well. That was not a good policy. Governor McAuliffe, when he came into office, we have, and actually Governor McDonald did in his last year in office, we have brought the tolls down, some $200 million. It was the right thing to do for motorists, but not the best use of taxpayer dollars. But did not think it was fair for motorists to have to pay the entire toll before they had the new capacity. So that was one issue. The other is really the ability of the concessionaire or the contractor to deliver. In Northern Virginia, we've had an excellent response, and people have had good comments regarding how the tolling has gone. Not so much in Hampton Roads, again, because of problems with billing. So the project itself in Hampton Roads is a fabulous construction project, was just ranked as one of the top in the country. But all that goes for naught if you don't deliver and you haven't used good policy. So that's one of the things we're looking for going forward. Not only getting the project in place, but making sure we have public understanding and buy-in and good use of their dollars for these projects going forward.
And of course, some of the push around that project related to the Department of the Navy, did it not?
It did. And look, there's no doubt there was a need for the project. I used to serve in Hampton Roads as the Commonwealth Transportation Board member, very familiar. And as we all know, defense not only is a part of the Virginia economy, a significant part, it's almost 50% of the Hampton Roads economy. They have water, many bridges. Getting around Hampton Roads is very difficult if you have one of those areas clog up. So the Navy made it clear it wasn't just a quality of life, it was also a readiness. They couldn't get their assets in place between the Air Base and the Navy base. So there's no doubt the project was needed, and we have many more needed down there. But still, policy, good financial decisions matter because, unfortunately, some of the issues we've dealt with down there have sort of tainted the ability to move forward with other projects because of the way they were done. But no, what are you absolutely right? Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission down there, which was new legislation that came in last year also to use those regional monies to get those projects. Very critical that's done. Governor McAuliffe has made it clear that's one of his main points in his administration, because if we can't move goods around Hampton Roads, we can't grow that economy. So we're working down there, but very, very important for the local economy, that transportation network.
So you're dealing with three very critical issues: transportation, public safety, and potentially national security.
We are. In fact, if you talk to the Army Corps of Engineers, which we deal with quite a bit in both roadways and our ports and other things, they continually point out that Hampton Roads area, among others in the state, but with the port, it is not just a very important state, but it is a national concern. And so we're working on getting that port identified as a Tier 1 port instead of a Tier 2, which allows us to receive more federal funding and to better use facilities there. As you know, you probably read in the news, the West Coast ports are going through some labor issues. Don't wish anybody any ill will, but that has pushed more product over here to the Port of Virginia. We got to make sure we're ready so when that's coming in. So very important. It's really critical to our national importance. Our roadways got to service those trucks and trains getting out of Hampton Roads to the Commonwealth and obviously to the rest of our country, where they're intended to go.
And of course, just west of Fairfax County, we've got I-66, and I understand that's going to be another P3 project.
It will be. In fact, the Commonwealth Transportation Board at a meeting next week will be debating whether to move forward with a resolution to start the procurement process. We've had, looking at this for a couple of years, working closely with our Northern Virginia officials. And it's going to be a fairly expensive project, $2 billion plus, and it needs to be multimodal. Making sure we have either bus rapid transit or some type of transit system in there to move people. So we'll be looking at that. It's important under our new guidelines that we show confidence. We make sure we get this right. So that's coming up, but very exciting. It's key to not only the Northern Virginia region, but again, national concern because of D.C. and servicing through there. Obviously, getting people to Dulles Airport is key to us, making sure they have access unobstructed, both from a highway standpoint and certainly with the metro that we're continuing on phase 2 to the airport.
Talk to us a little bit more about the criteria that will be used to determine priority of projects, especially congestion mitigation, which I understand is key in urban areas, but in rural areas I understand economic development is key.
That's right. In other words, so the key is to make sure we're being consistently applying and allowing every area of the Commonwealth to compete. So the law requires in the urban areas that congestion mitigation be the most heavily weighted factor. But in rural areas, my guess is that economic development and safety concerns are going to be the most heavily weighted. And the key will be we'll have a different template, and that's what we're working through now. We should have our first run sometime this June so we can make sure this works because the law requires it to be in place July 1st of 2016. But the key is we have a template that's consistently applied so that when people make their applications to either at the district level or the state level, they know they're going to have a consistent process. And so they have complete input into how these projects will be judged. So very, very important. Our state is very diverse, and there are different needs as we go across the Commonwealth.
So within all those elements, there will be a range of opinions, not unlike a baseball umpire maybe calling balls and strikes?
Yes, it's one of my favorite analogies. I used to play baseball at the University of Richmond. In fact, and so I tend to use analogies. But you're right, a strike zone is supposed to be from your under armpit down to the top of your knees. But if you played baseball, you know different umpires have different strike zones. But after your first time at bat, you know what that strike zone is. And that's the key, that we apply House Bill 2 consistently so people know. And it's not so much the absolute score, it's how you compare to others in the Commonwealth. And that's what we ought to focus on. I think it's going to be a big win for the Commonwealth. We're never going to get all the politics out of transportation funding, but it ought to be transparent, and people ought to understand why we're funding these. And I think this legislation, along with the bills this year, my hat's off to Governor McAuliffe. He's a business background. He understands good governance. He says, I don't have a governor's list, build the right projects. I want an independent CTB. So he's leading the charge here and making sure that we really be good fiduciaries of taxpayers' money in transportation.
30 seconds left, but I want you to opine about where you would like to see things a year or two from now.
Well, transportation is a key component of Governor McAuliffe's New Virginia economy. So what I'd like to see a couple years from now, not only the support of that, but the Commonwealth Transportation Board being the real policy board, and our agencies back to executing that policy, and our taxpayers see project after project being delivered in support of Governor McAuliffe's new economy.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us, Secretary of Transportation Aubrey Layne.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you for watching this special edition of Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.